Welcome to another exciting podcast of Royal Oak Victory Church. We're glad you've joined us. We are a community devoted to God, connected to others, and influencing our world.
Now, I want to start off this morning. I want to ask you a question. I think I already know the answer to this. And the question is this: have you ever gone into a store and purchased something, and when you got home, you regretted that purchase? By show of hands, who's done that? They've bought something and they regretted buying it. That's good. That's a better response than the first service. I'm pretty sure that if you aren't putting up your hand, I need to come talk to you because you've got some wisdom that I don't. But it was funny because this week I just had this idea. I've got to ask this question. And so I posed this question through email and I posted it on Facebook. I just wanted to see what some of these things were that people regretted purchasing. I had one person respond. They said that they had purchased a hand towel bar and it didn't work. So they were going to return it, but of course they bought it on sale. So it was a final sale. They couldn't return it. And this person indicated that towel bar is still under their bed in their bedroom. Years later, it's never been dealt with. It's just there. I had another person respond and said that they regretted fast food every time they bought it. I have a friend of mine whose husband is a worship pastor, and this is not in this church, but she said she has a feeling of regret every time he goes into Guitar Works. A lot of people responded with various articles of clothing. In fact, I had one guy respond that he regretted purchasing a Speedo. Now, I think everyone regretted that decision, but we also had one person in our congregation, and they shall remain nameless, but they said that they regretted purchasing Flames tickets. Now, I know this person's an Oilers fan, so I'm really wondering where the regret should be placed. Even my daughter chimed in on this when I asked the question at the dinner table, and I wasn't expecting my kids to respond, but my 9-year-old responded, and she's like, you know that board game? She's like, I really shouldn't have purchased that. And she had purchased it with the money that she had earned through her chores. And let me just show you what this game is. It's called Unicorn Surprise. This is actually a picture of the game. And you're supposed to collect these jewels. The weird thing about this game is to collect the jewels, you have to push down on the unicorn and it poops them out. Now, I can understand why she regretted purchasing this game. Now, in my life, I have had a few regrettable choices myself, things I have bought that I shouldn't have or on impulse and purchased and I regretted later. But the one that stands out to me the most is this one. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, right? Now, this one for me, Mary and I had just finished up with our gym membership. The contract had expired, and we wanted to continue to be healthy and stay in shape. And so we both agreed that we were going to take the money that we were putting into that gym membership and purchase some gym equipment. So we purchased this weight bench. And as you can see, it's in pristine condition because I don't think it's ever been used. I think it's been sitting in my basement for 2 years. In fact, I think this picture might show up on Kijiji later this week, just to get it out of my house. Because whether we're willing to admit it or not, the lure of advertisers catches our attention. And we make questionable purchases. We purchase things that maybe we regret. And sometimes we make purchases that we don't regret, and yet that just causes an accumulation of stuff in our house. We have a little bit more stuff, a little bit more junk. I mean, how many of us have a junk drawer in our house, right? This collection of odds and ends. And we just have this accumulation of clutter in our homes. I mean, the best example of this is you just drive through your neighborhood and you see how many people have parked their cars on their pads, not in their garages, because their garage has turned into a storage unit, right? Mary and I said, I was talking with a guy between services, Mary and I said, when we bought our new house a couple of years ago, that will never be us. I don't want to have to start my car in the middle of winter when it's been sitting on the pad. So somehow we've always managed to get our cars in the garage. But statistics tell us that the fastest growing real estate unit in North America right now is that of self-storage units. I mean, they just pop up everywhere, right? We have a problem. We have been inundated with this clutter, and many of us don't know what to do with it. And so what we end up seeing is we either ignore the clutter, we just kind of brush it out of our minds, or we go on a purge and we do a spring clean and we just kind of go, we're going to get rid of this and I'll never do it again, and yet every spring we do it. And if that wasn't enough evidence to say that we might have a problem with clutter, the most popular show on Netflix right now is this one. It's called Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. It's all about simplicity and tidying up and getting rid of clutter and throwing junk away. The most popular show on Netflix. And don't even get me started if you have kids. I've got 4 of my own, and just trying to gather together them and get them to focus on, the clothes actually go in the laundry basket, right? Make your beds. The toys don't just have to be scattered everywhere. It's an ongoing struggle. I'm convinced as a parent, one of the tests of our endurance is to walk down a hallway in the middle of the night and step on a piece of Lego with a bare foot and find out what comes out of your mouth. The University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, published a study that said the clutter that we have in our homes is leading to depression, anxiety, and hypertension. It is a problem that we have to solve. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Dave introduced us to a brand new series of messages called Parenting Not for Cowards, and how it is required of us to step into this role of parenting, to really be courageous, and how we need God's wisdom to really parent with some sanity in their lives. And I want to continue with that today by looking at how we as parents, and really this is for everybody, how we can have the courage to lead by example in our purchasing decisions and our accumulation of clutter. Or to be more fair, really we should be talking about our deaccumulation of clutter. Now, if you have your Bibles with you, or you have a Bible app today, turn with me to Matthew chapter 19. Matthew chapter 19, and we're going to take a look at a story here, and I'm going to be reading out of the English Standard Version. If you're new to the Bible, Matthew is about 2/3 of the way through the book, at the start of what we call the New Testament. And the New Testament is the story of Jesus, his life, his ministry, and then the early church that founded after his death, resurrection, and ascension, and the journey there. And so we pick this story up in Matthew, right in the middle of Jesus' time here on earth. And he has gone into the area of Galilee, and a crowd has gathered around him. And really what he begins to do is he hosts a Q&A session. People are asking him questions, and he's responding, and it's going back and forth. And some of the questions are from his disciples, and some of them are from the religious leaders. And then we pick up this story here in verse 16. It says, "Behold, a young man came up to him, saying, 'Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?' And he said to him, 'Why do you ask me what is good? There is only one who is good, and if you would enter life, keep the commandments.' He said to him, 'Which ones?' And Jesus said, 'You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself.' The young man said to him, 'All of these I have kept, what do I still lack?' Jesus said to him, 'If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me.' When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions." It's amazing to me that this young man missed out on such an incredible opportunity. He was invited to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. He was invited to follow. And yet he chose not to because of his things. He had placed his personal value in his wealth and his stuff. His clutter became a hindrance to him. And if we're not careful, it's going to have the same effect on us. Joshua Becker, who's a Christian author, tells the story of how he came to this understanding in his own life. He was interviewed by Focus on the Family, and he said this. He says, I was doing some typical spring cleaning, as most people do. I was cleaning out the garage. I had spent hours working on this. My son, who was 5 years old, was in the backyard begging me to come play with him. And in the midst of it, I struck up a conversation with my neighbor, complaining how much time I had spent on the garage. But as I looked at the pile of things in my driveway, and then I see my 5-year-old son swinging in the backyard where he had been all morning, suddenly I had this realization that not only were my things not making me happy, but my things were actually taking me away from the very thing that did bring me happiness and purpose and fulfillment in life. Just as the young man who had encountered Jesus went away sorrowful because of his possessions, this man, Joshua Becker, came to the same realization. And I know I have been in the same situation where I would much rather be spending time with my family than taking care of the clutter in my life. If we all realize this is a problem, and I think we've stated fairly clearly that this is a problem for us today, then we need to find a way to move beyond it, to get past it, to release this grip that it has on our lives. We need to have the ability to be available to those that are around us, those that we value, and especially for our spouse and for our kids. Somehow we have to become clutter-free. Because it is in becoming clutter-free that's what really will open us up to truly be available to those that are around us. Jesus himself taught this in Luke 12:15. He said this, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." It's amazing that Jesus himself said that our life, our value doesn't come from our things. And throughout Scripture, we see the answer of how to get clutter-free, how to remove these things from our life so that they're no longer a distraction. But for us to understand this, it has to be us going all in. We have to look around and we have to go, you know what, I'm going to be totally available. I'm going to be all in on this. It has to be a holistic approach. And so I need a little help from you guys this morning. I need to make sure that we're all on the same page if we're going to go through this. I need you guys to tell me that I want to be clutter-free. All right, so you're going to repeat the sentence, all right? I want to be clutter-free. You're not in. I need it again. I need it with enthusiasm. We're going to make some changes this morning. I want to be clutter-free. There we go. All right, so we can start on this process. The first thing that we need to do is we need to understand that I need to be available mentally. Which makes sense if you think about it, because any change that we are going to make in our lives has to start with our minds. It has to start with our thought process, because it's there that we make the decisions to purchase. It's there that we make the decision to accumulate. It's also where we make the decision to be busy. Now, I haven't mentioned it so far, but this state of clutter isn't just about things. It's also about our general state of busyness that we maintain. What is it that occupies our thoughts, that takes away from our availability for those around us? Because we're not just talking about toys and Legos and socks left on the floor. We're talking about our availability. Now, this isn't hard to understand. I mean, the new cultural norm, when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hi, how are you doing?" we used to respond fine. When we're asked the question now, how do we respond? Busy. We say busy. We don't say fine anymore. And it's become this cultural acceptable thing that it's okay to be busy. It's okay to be overwhelmed, right? It's not even right for us if we think about it in terms of our families, that we're always busy. A recent study came out and said that 75% of parents who responded to this study said they are not able to read to their children at night because they're too busy. 75% of parents admit that they are too busy, which is crazy. That's tragic, especially when we know the benefits of reading in terms of good grades and relationship building and how much it helps them in school and the family dynamic. It's just crazy to me that 75% of parents are saying they don't have time. But it doesn't have to be that way. Busyness is not inevitable. Busyness is a choice. I mean, we go back 2,000 years to Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher. He said it like this. He said, everybody agrees that no one pursuit can be successfully followed by a man who is preoccupied with many things. 2,000 years ago, and they understood that possessions are a distraction. But whether it's possessions or busyness, it all comes down to how we mentally perceive this in our lives. Are we really in need? Is this item or is this thing something that we really have to have? Is it really a want? Or can I be happy with what I have? Paul touched on this in the book of Philippians because he had learned to make that mental shift. He had learned to move beyond the things and to live life in abundance. And he wrote it like this. He says, not that I was ever in need, for I have learned to be content. Let's say that word together, content. Right? I have learned to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. His attitude was one of contentment. And again, that's a choice for us. We can choose to be busy. We can also choose to be content, to go against the cultural norm, to be okay not to accumulate stuff, to not accumulate clutter, and instead to move past those things. In fact, contentment can be defined as being mentally or emotionally satisfied with the way things are. Joshua Becker, the author I described earlier, described it like this. He said, it's a decision to choose not to compare up, but to compare down. You see, when we get in the habit of comparing with those that are around us, people that we know, like our neighbors, we begin to desire the things that they have. We want more. This causes us to purchase things that we don't really need, which in turn causes this increase in clutter and distraction that we want to be rid of. But he comments, he says, really, we need to compare ourselves to those that have less than us. Because in that, the same trap doesn't exist. Especially when we realize that those with less are often happier than we are. I don't know how many times I've been on a missions trip or looked around to those that are have less than I have, and you just get this overwhelming sense of they don't have very much, but they have so much more happiness, so much more joy in their lives than I do. So obviously, possessions is not what causes that inner joy. I mean, it's just so clear that the old adage is true. Money doesn't buy happiness, but we need to start living as if that is true. Right? Money doesn't buy happiness. We all know that to be the case. So now we need to start living it. Now we have to start making that mental choice that we are not going to strive after. We're not going to build clutter. We're not going to build distraction. But instead, we're going to choose that what matters to us, which leads us to the second way that we need to be available. And that is that I need to be available financially. I need to be available financially. Checking on the baby one night, a new mother found her husband, a woodworker, standing over their baby's crib, silently watching him. As he stood down on the sleeping infant, she saw this mixture of emotions on his face: disbelief and doubt, delight, amazement, enchantment, skepticism. And touched by this unusual display and with the deep emotions it aroused, and with eyes glistening, she slipped her arm around her husband. "A penny for your thoughts," she said. "It's amazing," he said, trying not to wake the baby. "I just can't see how anybody could make this crib for $67. Our life is filled with financial choices, and I mean, that's ever so much true when we have kids. I mean, our life is tasked with keeping them fed and clothed and educated, and if we're fortunate enough, the ability to give gifts, to give toys and amazing experiences. But if we're not careful, we can easily create the clutter in our home that distracts us more than draws us closer. Most of us know that we own too much, and we feel this weight, feel this burden on us. And we get tired of just always cleaning up and always managing and organizing this clutter. Our rooms get messy. Our drawers don't close. I mean, that's the one thing with my boys' drawers. I can never get them closed now. That's not because they have too much stuff. It's because they don't put their stuff in there properly. That's another topic. Our closets are filled from top to bottom. The evidence of clutter is everywhere. And the crazy thing is, I read this week that over the course of our lifetime, we will spend a total of 3,680 hours searching for lost things. That's 153 days looking for your keys. And in the same study, which was done in England, it said the average 10-year-old owns 238 toys, but only plays with 12 of them. Each of these toys in each of these homes costs something. Social scientist Thorstein Veblen coined the phrase conspicuous consumption to describe the lavish spending that we engage in on the goods and services, mainly for the purpose of showing off wealth and status. And he coined that phrase in 1899. How much farther have we come in our purchasing with the advent of things like Amazon, where it's here the next day? Right? We don't even have to leave our homes anymore. And if we go back to Paul's acknowledgement of being able to live in contentment regardless of the circumstances, we quickly realize that contentment, as I said, does not come from things. If it did, surely there would be somebody out there with enough money who has bought everything and is happy. But we've never met anybody like that. In fact, we've never learned of someone who says it. In fact, most of these people say the old adage, money doesn't buy you happiness. But what we really see is that contentment doesn't come from the excess of consumption, but instead the opposite. It's the rejection of it. It's a choice to then go in and say, you know what, I'm not going to buy this. I'm going to stop spending. I'm going to stop accumulating what I have. Jesus said it in Matthew 6:19. He says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. And this next line, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where's your treasure? Where's your heart? Is it like the young man we saw in the story, and it's all locked up in stuff and resources and employment and income and all that provides? Or is your heart and your treasure found in those that are important to you, the relationships that you have securely in foundation in Jesus? When we reject the consumeristic and materialistic influences of our culture, we create freedom. We create availability. We create opportunity because it frees us up. It frees up our energy. It frees up our time, and it frees up our finances. And then we can use those things, those resources, to bring back into alignment our deepest heart values. We find time to spend with our families. And instead of buying Rubbermaid containers to put more stuff in, we instead spend our excess to bless others. This shift is one of the core values of our church. It simply states this: living simply, giving generously. And if we read that full statement, it reads like this. It says, we as a church will faithfully steward our resources in a way that models the reality that we can be free, living a life of simplicity and generosity. This is who we are. This is who we are as a church. This is who we've said that we want to be as individuals and as a community. that we want to be free, that we want to live in simplicity and to choose generosity instead of choosing materialism. And it's true, because to tie these two concepts together, to be able to live simply and to give generously, you have to be content. If you're not content, if you're not living in that attitude of contentment that Paul described, this is a lot harder. And God is calling us to it. Because true life is not found in our ability to spend. Instead, it is in the invisible things of life. It's found in faith and hope and love. That's where life really is. It's found in Jesus. This is what the young man missed. He was sure that his wealth, that his possessions were the answer. And yet he knew something was missing. And he sought out Jesus. He asked the question. He said, "What is the meaning of life?" And Jesus said, "Follow me." But he was stuck. He was unavailable because of what he had. And that's why he walked away in sorrow. All of us have to make that decision to choose whether or not we are going to follow Jesus. Because when we choose to follow him, when we choose to live in contentment, we cannot accumulate stuff. The two are contrasting one another. That has to be our foundation to move forward. And if you've never had that relationship with Jesus, if you've never accepted him into your life and asked for his wisdom, his guidance, the ability to live clutter-free, and don't get me wrong, this is something we have to do daily. This is something we need wisdom for all the time. Well, if you don't have that wisdom, there needs to be a start. And I would love to be able to answer any question you may have. In fact, that's one of our core values as a church, is we want to help you on that journey. And so at the end of the service, we have a yes table here on my right that we would love to answer any question you might have about what it means to follow Jesus in your life. Because remember this one thing: everything you have because of Jesus. Everything you have because of Jesus. So we need to be available mentally, we need to be available financially, and finally, we need to be available relationally. I need to be available relationally. The greatest detriment to living a life full of clutter is the impact it has on those around us, those that are closest to us. We just look back. Joshua Becker's revelation came when he saw his young son swinging by himself in the backyard for hours, waiting patiently for his dad. I don't know how many times I have had to respond to my kids that I don't have the time or I don't have the availability because of the needs of the house or the needs of the car or there's just the stuff that has to be dealt with. Now, I'm not saying that those things aren't they aren't bad, they're not unnecessary things, because we do have to have them. But we have to decide, where are our priorities? What's most important to us? I think it's kind of ironic that social media was designed to bring us together, and it does the exact opposite, right? It pushes us apart. It makes us less relational than we used to be. It keeps us distracted, keeping us occupied emotionally and mentally so that we have nothing left to give to those around us at an emotionally healthy level. I do find it kind of ironic that there's this video going around on Facebook of a mom so distracted by her phone that she can't just see the child beside her and how much they need her. We need to decide that the people around us are our most important earthly priority. We need to decide that our relationships in life have to go beyond just functional. They have to go beyond just serving a purpose. But instead, we are going to choose to step in. We're going to choose that we want and we desire honesty and authenticity, that we want love and intimacy. That we will make the effort to clean up the clutter, to create the availability, to build long-lasting, real relationships, to build family. I think we all desire this, but the struggle is in how to accomplish it. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down." I want to stop there for a moment because I have always been in the habit of just keeping going on this sentence and reading especially the sin that so easily trips us up. When we read this, we have to understand that Paul isn't talking just about sin. Yes, he emphasizes it. But what he's saying is that we need to strip off every weight that slows us down. Not just the things that are wrong, but everything that hinders our relationship. When we go to the rest of this verse, it says, "And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us." Like I said, this has got to be a daily decision. It's not easy. But God is giving us the ability to run this race with endurance. But it means stripping that weight off. It means removing the clutter. Refocusing on what's important. Really what it comes down to is intentionality. Removing the things that are holding us back and putting into place those things that will connect us. Now to leave today, I wanted to give you something very practical. 5 quick things that you can do to make sure that you make this a priority in your life. And these actually come from Focus on the Family, about creating intentional moments with family. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to focus on prayer. We need to focus on prayer. If Jesus is first and foremost, this makes sense. We need to pray for our kids. We need to pray for the God's wisdom as parents that we can guide them in the right way. But more than that, we also have to pray with our kids. We need to show, we need to model, we need to value the importance of prayer in our families. The second thing we need to include is laughter. We know from science that laughter has a multitude of benefits. It suppresses pain, it reduces stress, but laughter also creates a connection with others. If you think back to your most valued moments with your parents, or your most valued moments with your friends, you'll see that they are always tied up in emotion. And that's because the way our minds work is that the memory for it to be implanted has to be tied to emotion. The stronger the emotion, the easier it is for us to remember it. So create those moments, create those opportunities to laugh and to have fun as a family. Those are the memories you're going to remember. Family fun strengthens your relationship with your children. It creates positive memories. The third thing we need to do is prioritize time. This is pretty self-evident, but again, it needs to be intentional. We need to go above and beyond to find time with our kids, and this is more than just sitting in front of the TV. My family does a family movie night once a week, or at least we try to as much as possible. I swear I have watched every animated movie ever made, both good and bad. I'm looking forward to my kids getting a little bit older so I can broaden the library a little bit. We've also instituted family outings. But more than that, we want to intentionally spend time with our children, and specific children, by going on one-on-one outings. So for me as a dad, with my 9-year-old daughter, we do daddy-daughter dates. I do father-son outings with my boys. And Mary does these with her kids as well. Like any family, we're not perfect, and I would always like to do these more often than we do. But we are working on creating intentional connection points with our kids. Because not only does it build relationship, it also teaches our kids how they should be respectfully treated by other people. I must admit, as a father, I'm really glad my kids aren't in the dating phase yet. But for my daughter, I'm going to teach her how she should be treated. For my boys, I am going to teach them how they should respect women by how they respect their mother. But we can't do that unless we spend time with them. The fourth thing that we need to do is we need to have conversation, and we need to understand that talking is not conversation. A lot of our family communication centers on the superficial aspects of life, right? The kids come home from school. How was school? Fine. What'd you do today? Nothing. What are you going to do tomorrow? I don't know. That's not conversation. right? We revolve our lives around daily schedules and upon the kids doing their chores or their homework. But what we need to do is we need to set aside time to learn about our kids. We need to learn about their likes and their dislikes, their opinions and ideas, their dreams and their fears, free of life's interruptions. Some of my favorite stories have come from the genuine conversations that I've had with my children. Some of my favorite stories, and the staff can tell you this, are from the conversations I've had with my boys, especially my 5-year-old. He's crazy. It's awesome, but I never know what's going to come out of his mouth. It's amazing. I love it because kids are honest, they're creative, they're authentic, right? They don't hold anything back. They're funny, they're engaging, but we have to make room for those engagements. And the fifth thing that we need to do is that we need to spend dinner together. Researchers have found that family members who eat dinner together at least 4 times a week exhibit improved communication, healthier eating habits, higher grades at school, and fewer problems with at-risk behaviors. If that study is true, and I have to believe that it is, I think we should be having dinner more than 4 times a week because these are incredible benefits to spending time together as a family. But the key to a family dinner is to remove distraction. I don't know how many times I have walked into a restaurant, I have seen a family sitting around a table, and instead of talking to one another, you get this. 4 faces in 4 screens and 0 communication. It's become the norm, but it shouldn't be the norm. And so to conclude this morning, we want to give all of you a challenge. We want to take this one step further from removing the clutter towards building better and deeper relationships with one another. As we've said this morning, it's about availability and intentionality, and so we want you to do something intentional this week.